So I'm also proud today as the organizer write my position as keynote, right? Keynote. So this is funny sometimes. Keynotes. So I breathe the king because of keynotes. Just for fun. Well, in the next maybe less than 1 hour, I'm trying to discuss you. I'm trying to sharing you about my insights regarding the connection between hybrid media environments within the current political context, with special focus to Indonesia. My apologies. Of course, following the end of my presentation, hopefully we can hear some insight from non-Indonesian attendees like you are about your country's similar situation regarding the connection between media, politics, democracy, social movement, etc. So let's start. If you see my first slides, this is the poster that now using by many social activists. I hope I'm safe to show you this poster to you today. I hope you are also safe. Yeah. The poster is very provocative, right? Tell us about Jokowi. I'm sure everyone knows Jokowi, our president. 10 years president. Mulyono. We call him in the funniest way as Mulyono, we call him. Yeah? So Jokowi is the father of the family-oriented, the family-interested presidential power instead of public-oriented presidential powers. Yang bahasa we call it dynasty political. This is a good introduction to you because I'm trying to give you a little bit analysis of observations regarding to what extent this issue of political crisis now happening in Indonesia, connecting with the media and democracy in the future. So next slide, please. Well, to be order persons, my presentation consists of these some points. I will starting by understanding the hybrid politics itself from theoretical point of view, and then democracy in media, followed by the very short explanation of the democratic political landscape with media system in Indonesia. So in between, of course, if we use hybrid, mean in between something with somethings. And then I will give you more empirical case studies regarding Indonesian media. Hopefully to give you more understand, to give you more respect to what we are discussing today. And of course, to follow what yesterday Nikos Sarpentia's very intelligent description of the hybrid media and politics. Today my sessions seem like to be down to earth in case of Indonesia. And then hopefully we will have short discussions following the end of my presentations, and then we share our insight together. Once again, this is also the posters, which very provocative. Yeah. I took this photo directly by my own camera when we were in front of Yogyakarta State Palace, and just in the center point of the city. We were gathered mass rally, and we not really celebrate, but we were like in the very sad feelings that democracy in this country was died. Okay, next slide. Well, when we discuss about hybrids, in my view, when we discuss about what's the meaning of political transitions between A to B or between one to another, I think we need to be aware about the history and the type of democracy itself. Because it is funny that democracy itself is a hybrid, right? In terms of its meaning, in terms of the meaning of democracy itself, and in terms of the history, and in terms of many things which sharpen the democracy. For instance, I took from Robert Adal a very old book on democracy. He tells us about a historical context of the democracy, which coming back from the ancient history of Athenians. It is in Greece, yeah, exactly in the Athens city, where in the past democracy indicated by direct communications between people, usually in the public parks. Yeah. So democracy means a direct interaction, a direct voting, a direct selections between people and their leaders. And also it was like public gatherings in the parks. Of course, comparing to now in digital environment, it was like offline, it was conventional gatherings. What we can learn about this, that in the past when Athenian was like considered as the first democratic model, it was people can access, can share directly their aspiration to their leaders, right? Instead of mediated communications. Instead of like we are having now, that we are very difficult to voice our interest to our leaders because of many bureaucratic process of democracy. However, the history is continue, right? Because continue to when European countries transform into very modern capitalism and very huge influence by the industry, by the market. And then the definition of democracy moved from direct communication into markets, electoral communication, yeah, into the mediated communication, in terms of communication something. And then in this step, there were like trading of democracy, right? Between who has more money with who has less money. That's why this democracy history considered as the market or electoral or bourgeois democracy. And then, of course, at the same time, in the next couple of years or century, there were a critic, and then the democracy moved into the what we call social democracy or post-capitalist democracy, where the important thing is not about voting itself, or not about the money, but about the representation and all corporatizations. Yeah. So representation is key to indicate whether democracy is running or not in the particular countries. However, these are happening in what we call the Western country, right? For instance, in the northern part of Europe or the northern part of the America, or to some extent in Australia. But in the post-authoritarian countries, like us in Indonesia, to the best of my knowledge, maybe also India, maybe also some other South Asian countries, yeah? For instance, Malaysia, Philippines, and now we are hearing very critical situation about Thailand. So we call these countries post-authoritarians. What exactly the condition of democracy in this authoritarian? Most scholars from Western perspective, once again, consider that democracy is in shadow, illiberal, yeah? Liberal, but no liberal. In between liberalism, democracy, and quote-unquote authoritarian democracy. And Indonesia, in a very declarative way, provocative, not really provocative, but very, very confident way, promote Pancasila democracy. I'm not sure what is the meaning of Masoli Pancasila. You can tell the audience. Is Pancasila democracy or not? So we can discuss maybe in more than 1 week about this. However, this slide tells us about, once again, the diversity of democracy, to some extent the hybridity of democracy, from its meaning, from the empirical and also in terms of historical considerations. Yeah. Next slide. Let me join you to discuss more on the conceptual map about to understand what exactly the hybridity. I mentioned you earlier that hybrid is in between, right? In between democracy and blah blah blah. And when we discuss about hybrid system, it could be consist of at least 4 structure, 4 components, right? At the top level, we will discuss about the paradigm of system, the paradigm of our lives, which, if we refer to political science, the scientists mostly separate between authoritarianism, liberalism, democracy, etc. This is a very solid concept. However, we can also criticize this kind of conceptions. Other than paradigm, we can discuss about the values. For instance, between public interest and one side versus paternalism, clientelism. Clientelism is rooted, for instance, in our Japanese cultures. Also paternalism, which oppose the public interest. This is about values. And then we can also took an example about the structures. The structure of the system, of the governance system, for instance. Governments, elections, media institution could be hybrid, right? Media institution could be hybrid. Let's see, I will show you some slides about this. And then lastly, we can discuss about the cultures, between competitive cultures, between open and transparent culture versus closed and monopolistic regimes, right? So in Indonesia, during the last 10 years when Jokowi in powers, we experienced this contradictory climate, right? Sometimes Jokowi promote competitions in the political election, but at the same time he also apply oligarchies, monopolistic political elections. So that's what I mean by hybrid. Hybrid culture, hybrid political culture, or in our context today is hybrid political communications. Next slide. And let's go down into the hybrid of democracy. Yeah, if I refer to, for instance, Levitsky, Stephen Levitsky, who wrote a very intelligent about competitive authoritarianisms, we can at least understand some point here. What exactly he mentioned about competitive authoritarianism? Which in my observation, we can use this concept to observe Indonesian current context. Yeah. Instead of pseudo democracy, liberal democracy, competitive authoritarianism may be a good point. Concept we can use to observe what happened in Indonesia now. Yeah? For instance, in terms of structures, yeah? In terms of actors, in terms of values, in terms of the paradigms. Yeah? A small group governs regime, usually not ideological but pragmatic. We can say now, Kim plus, yeah, Kim plus. Only Indonesian can understand this Kim plus, Kim plus. With one person in power try to perform only one big coalitions over very small, or maybe less, or maybe kota kosong coalitions in our Indonesian election today. Yeah? And what's the interest behind? Not ideological, but pragmatical. I mean, just to get the voters and then to getting the powers. Not about to pursue the public interest behind. This is what's the meaning of competitive authoritarianism in the first point. The second point is about the condition, ideally or empirically, individual has a freedom, but it's limited, very limited. And order are always important. So for instance, once again, sorry for non-Indonesian participants, I will give you one very practical example. When the citizen want to do mass rally, for instance, tomorrow, a night before or a day before, they have to report to the police office in order to meet the administrative requirements. So, what happened when the public did not follow this guideline? It would be dangerous because of administrative. Yeah. But of course, they can speak freely. They can critique Jokowi. However, police will stop them with the reason that you have no permission. You did not inform us before. That's crazy, right? That's what the Lepesky meant about individual freedom limited. Order are important. Administrative are important. Let's use this example into our daily job as a lecturer, right? Lecturer also under pressure of administrative job instead of academic job. Right? I mentioned this last 2 days. Okay? So, not control everything, of course. However, they don't try, not control everything. Many matters are left up to individual. Individual have a very enjoyable condition of freedom. However, there is one thing that individual don't go with this. What exactly that? They don't threaten the small regime itself. To avoid your freedom, to anticipate your freedom to speak, please don't speak about, for instance, the dynasty issues. For instance, the Gibran and Jokowi issues. Otherwise, you will be controlled by the police, by the authorities. Court and legislator might be democratic in formal way, in legal way, but in practice controlled by the small regimes. We have many critical experience in the last 3 months, the last 6 months about our high courts. Right? In Indonesia we name it Mahkamah Konstitusi, where the constitution members has no freedom to go their decision into public instead of their decision into the president in powers and his family, of course. Okay, let's use this for our next discussions. Next slide. Here, I refer with maybe a bit expiry, because this is 2020 index about democracies. The slide shows us once again about the hybrid democracy from the index, right? So only, if I refer to this index report, only 8% of the world are considered full democracy. The rest are hybrid, flawed democracy, and also authoritarian democracy or authoritarianism. If I'm not sure, if I'm not wrong, Indonesia lists as the flawed democratic index. In between full democracy and in the hybrid regimes. Of course, we can discuss, criticize this index. At least it tells us about that. Once again, hybrid is happening in terms of political map in the world. Next, right? Let's go into the media and communication case, yeah? So, do you agree that internet is a public sphere? Any opinions, please? I'm not sure, okay. Okay. Give him a microphone first. Just to stop my thought, right? For a couple of minutes. Monggo, Mas Jai. What is your argument about is internet a public sphere is considered to our famous philosophers from German, right? Jürgen Habermas. Okay.
Yeah, I read Habermas, but a little bit, not
Okay.
really the whole book of his idea of deliberative democracy and public sphere. But yeah, when we talk about public sphere and then compared to Indonesian context,
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether we can find the idea of public in our history of nations.
Yeah.
Because public refers to deliberative and then intentional communication and then awareness about the rights and the public rights and so on, and quote-unquote educated persons knowing their position as citizens. In Indonesia, we have some other words, not really similar, but perhaps have similarity. In religious term, we can call umat or komunitas, community, and yeah. So even I don't know how Mas Saling sure that we have the idea of public in Indonesia context.
Yeah.
Indonesian context.
I totally agree with you. Maybe from empirical point of view, we can say that there is no public in Indonesia. In reality, Indonesia has no public but kaulo. Kaulo. This is Japanese term, ya. Kaulo. 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 In the opposite is apa, Mas Puji? Kalau ada kaulo berarti ada Gusti. Gusti, the king. Yeah. I'm sure I do agree with many critical scholars that say Indonesia is not really a republic, but this is a monarchy. I'm trying to provoke you. So why we discuss about public sphere? This is an ideal condition, of course, to wider context of Indonesian in some of other countries. If you every day read about these descriptions, this tells us in a very positive way that internet is a forum for public. Yeah, it can share global ownership. Everyone can have a social media account, right? When I ask my student in the class how many accounts you have, they always tell me I have more than 5 accounts. This is funny. They celebrate the freedom to have accounts, the freedom to own the accounts. Yeah. Also, some industry-based consultants always provoke us that internet provide collaborative engagement, freely accessible process, transparent, collaborative, blah 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 and blah. But let's say the index on the opposite side in this slide. Is free internet is a mythology or reality? And once again, this map tells us that there is no single conditions of internet freedom, right? It could be free, maybe in a very small part of the world, or the rest is partly free, not free, and not access, of course. So, according to this map, Indonesia is in the yellow, right, the yellow color, right? Partly free, yeah. So not free, of course. But maybe right now we can consider not free. Yeah, sorry, yeah. Okay, so this is the good example to show us about the hybridity politik, hybridity media in terms of communication, yeah, in terms of freedom of speech. Okay, next slide. Here the danger one is about when we have a digital account, right, social media account, we will be controlled by the very, very huge digital corporations. It's, according to some expert, the surveillance capitalism will control us. And I do agree that they are the fragile giants, it's not good giants, actually. For instance, when you use Google Play, when you use Google Map, Google owners will know your positions and will know your activities. And the Google owners will sell your position, your activities into other corporations in the name of business, in the name of profits. However, we can avoid this situation, right? We have no other choice. Instead of using Gmail, Google Map, Google Classroom, Google Search Engine, etc. So we have to think this about. Maybe following the end of this conference, we will gather a protest to Google. I still remember that the last 3 months, I attend the Alliance of Independent Journalists Congress on Palembang. In between the Congress, there was like a conference where one Google representative speak on that. When the representative speak, and then suddenly about 10 to 20 journalists, critical journalists, go to the front by showing posters to critique Google policy on the Israel war to Palestinians. That was, in my observation, those very very brave and intelligent actions. Yeah, that's another issue, yeah, about the politicization of Google, the use of Google corporation to favoring Israel genocide actions instead of protecting the Palestinian people. Next slide. From the political history, we can dream the situation in the past, right? There was in 2011 very interesting development of how internet used for political reform in the East, including Egypt, yeah. And we call them Arab Spring, yeah. Tahrir Squad. This is this event placed the internet in a very positive way. However, in the next couple of years, we experience how social media used to deliver fake news, used to deliver many numbers of disinformations as a way to, as a tactic for political contestations. It started by Donald Trump and then followed by the Indonesian leaders, unfortunately. Yeah. Gemoy, for instance. Yeah? Gemoy is a good example in using social media to fabricate the image of the politician from bad image to good image, and then to getting the voters, the highest voters, instead of to educate the voters. So we are now in a condition of hybridity about freedom of expression and the rise of what the political scientists said about the authoritarian populisms. Yeah. Next slide. And also from technological determinism issues, we can explain this situation, right? We are now in the transition from privacy into post-privacy, where there is no privacy on social media, where privacy could be a capital. Yeah. During the last 2 weeks, there was a discussion about the son of President Jokowi who left to US, right? Using private jet. Yeah? That's privacy, of course, but could be public issues, could be capital. Yeah? And then from news to post-truth, post-news, because more disinformation now on social media, but less information. Oh, I only have 5 minutes. Okay. Human and non-human, because humans, from critical point of view now, when use social media, move themselves into algorithmic numbers, not a human as usual. So, in terms of media and communication, journalists now is moved to post-journalists or robotic journalists, AI journalists. This picture showing us about the AI presenters, yeah, which now are using in Indonesia TV1 or and in many others television industry. Next slide. Let's go down into Indonesian democracy because of limitation times. My apologies, I have no more time to explain this. But to summarize, Indonesian democracy from the norms, from the constitution, seem also hybrid between Western value and the Indonesian value. Yeah. So, for instance, the fourth pillar of Pancasila, let me say in bahasa, kerakyatan yang dipimpin oleh hikmah dan kebijaksanaan dalam permusyawaratan perwakilan. This is the statement of democracy in Indonesia from its constitution, and it consists of 4 pillars. Yeah. The first one is citizenship. The second one is public ethics. The third is consensus and then representations. I can see from my own perspective that citizenship is not coming from Indonesia, ya, Mas Muzayyin. No, there is no citizenship in Indonesia. Saya tahu loh. This come from the Western perspective, yeah. But because our founding fathers, Hatta, Soekarno, was in the Netherlands, that way maybe they bring out this idea when they perform Pancasila, citizenship, and then public ethics. There is no public ethics in Indonesia. Every day is family ethics. I'm too provocative. Okay, but we have consensus, right? We have gotong royong concept. Yeah. This is very Indonesian style. But in a more negative way, gotong royong means sometimes kolaborasi. And representations. Yeah, representation. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to tell you that this is a hybrid concept. Yeah, next slide. And to the history of Indonesian media, there is a very dynamic condition of Indonesian politics, and its influence also the role of the media. Yeah? From very early independent period, post-independent, on 2040s, the media role was like to propagate the integration of nations, yeah? The national integrations. However, when Suharto empowers, the media supposed to be voicer of pembangunanism, because the state control totally the media. Following the end of Suharto era, the media considered like opposition themselves as political and market polarization issues. And now in the post-COVID-19 and digital era, I'm not sure, maybe in between, yeah, in between marketizing contents and perhaps should be providing public more space. Yeah. In this slide, the summary of this slide is that tell you about the dynamic situations, not the single situation of Indonesian media landscapes. And I'm always happy to to show this cover of the books coming from Mick Chesney, that he said that rich media but poor democracy. So Indonesia now having maybe more than 40,000 online media, but full with disinformation. There is no democracy, there is no democratic discussion there, in general. Yeah. Next slide. This is also the situation of press freedom, not only in Indonesia but in Southeast Asia, yeah, Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand. Next slide. And let me show you in the next 2-3 slides before I stop my talk about the media governance situation, which is unfortunately also hybrid. Yeah, let's tell you about in between public and authority, political controls. This is a good example. For instance, we have public television in Indonesia, we have public radio, but only in the legal basis, yeah, only on broadcasting number 32/2002. But in reality, the commercial media is dominant actors. Yeah. Also, we have in Indonesia the self-regulatory body, yeah, for media monitoring, media protection, namely Press Council. We have Dewan Pers, yeah. We have Broadcasting Council, Komisi Penyiaran Indonesia. However, at the same time, the Ministry of Communication also has similar power. Yeah? We enjoy freedom of expression. At the same time, we experience digital surveillance. We enjoy also legal protection of competition in politics, access to political party. At the same time, but in reality, the political party, the media ownership is centrally located in Jakarta, and also the ownership itself. That's the meaning of hybridity. Yeah? Hybridity in media policy, media regulations, media structures. And the implication of this vision is clearly, I frequently talk about these issues with many social activists and many startup owners who concentrate their activities with alternative media. For instance, Conde, Motatuli, Watchdog, I talked to them about the marginalization of local and alternative journalism and media, simply because of these hybrid conditions. Next slide. And this is the logos that maybe more help you to understand what I mean by hybrid. Yeah? In Indonesia, we have Kominfo. Yeah? Kominfo means Ministry of Communication and Informatics, which has full mandate to issue license for broadcasting. However, at the same time, we have Komisi Penyiaran Indonesia, which only has a very minor mandate to control the contents, to supervise the contents. Also, we have, of course, Dewan Pers. Compared to the UK has a very strong institution of monitoring, an integrated institution of supervising media, namely Office of Communications, right, in a single institution. And also from the US perspective, we understand about FCC, Federal Communication Commission, which has a similar mandate with Ofcom. Let's see the difference between Indonesia, UK, and the US. I'm not going to say whether Indonesia is more better. This is about what I still remember from Nico yesterday about let's celebrate hybridity instead of criticizing. Maybe yeah. Let's think about letters. Yeah. This is a good example of hybrid media regulators once again in Indonesia. And now, if I'm not sure if we did not have interest to control critics, Kominfo will take over the power of KBI, take over the power of Dewan Pers. This is a dangerous. Hopefully this is not working yet. Next slide, or maybe this is the last slide. So in summary, if I refer to the Harlini Mancini's book about 3 model of media system published on 2004 and also revised by 2012. The authors intelligently try to update the last classification of media systems. And now they promote 3 models: the polarized, pluralist, and then democratic, corporatist, and the liberal models. So our big question today is, what is the Indonesian media system model, right? Media system model. With reference to what I mentioned earlier in my slides. To the best of my observation, of course I'm not the expert one. I see Indonesian media system is a hybrid between polarized, pluralist, democratic, corporative, and the liberal. You can see in the yellow marks in this slide that at one point Indonesia is media and communication where politics much control of our activities, and there is no exactly public media, but in reality RRI and TVRI can be considered as state media or government model of broadcasting. And also there are many cases which state intervention happenings are strong. Yeah? Not only to the authorities by why they deliver money, anggaran to the APBN, to KBI or to the others, in a way to control the agencies, but also to the media directly and to the journalists. And I'm happy to repeat again the concept of Nico about participations. There is no participation in media ownership, in media licensing process. But the reality is strong clientelism. So if you have no connection to the authority, please don't have positive perception about whether your proposal to set up broadcasting, for instance, will be issues. Yeah. At the same time, Indonesia has very good historical point about the strong party press in the Sukarno era, and then also when the Suharto was in powers, because the media is exactly used by Suharto to set up his political agenda. And at the same time, now we are seeing very massive growth of the market domination, market oriented of social media in opposition to the public interest media. So to conclude, let's celebrate hybridity, but let's also criticize. And I'm very happy to hear the comparative perception from non-Indonesian audience, non-Indonesian attendee today, in order to making this session a comparative discussion between Indonesia and others. Yeah. Okay, with this statement, thank you for your listening, and all the best. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Pak Ading. On campus, we used to call Pak Mas Duki Mas Ading in a more casual ways. I think many of you also call Pak Mas Duki the same way. So, my apology if I sometimes call Pak Mas Duki or Mas Ading. It's the same person. Okay, thank you very much, Pak Mas Luki, for a very insightful presentation. I think this topic is very important, especially for us Indonesians, and I think this topic also relates to other contexts as well as Pak Mas Luki mentioned that post-authoritarian democracies are not only applied in Indonesia but also in other countries like India and also other Southeast Asian countries. So if I may to point a key point of your presentation, Pak Mas Luki, I'm interested in your presentation that says Indonesia is actually a confusing regime in terms of democracy. Like on one hand, the government, like the president, for instance, promotes healthy competition in terms of democracy, but at the same time, the government also try to oppress, critics on government through digital surveillance and things like that. So I think that's a very, like a very interesting things to discuss for us as Indonesian and also for other audience from other countries. So now it's time for Q&A sessions. I believe many of you have interesting questions or other comments to discuss with us today. So please, if any one of you want to ask questions, you can raise your hand. Okay, and also sharing insights, it's, okay.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Alvina Rahmazari. Pak Mas Luki already know me as Alvin. I'm really intrigued with the presentation, especially considering what's happening now as right now. Yep, in 29 August, I heard there will be final demo, and we definitely need media for information and etc. But my question is, it may little bit differ from the main topic, but I believe there is still some connection. Is it possible that there will be a change or revolution in Indonesia media, considering the political situation we have now? Not to mention, we are facing threats of platform blocking and a lot of journalists, what is bungkam in English, yeah? Silence, yeah. We are facing so many threats in media, like journalists being silenced, and platforms such as Twitter was threatened to be blocked because government said pornography, but actually when people found out this Twitter platform is popular and viral with a lot of government secret that have been exposed, and it's happening right now. And I believe government won't just sit silent about this, and with the demonstration, this is definitely government versus people stuff. So yeah, my main question is there any possible? Is it possible that there will be revolution or change with the media, considering the situation we have now? Thank you.
Okay. So let me directly, not really answer, but give you more points. I hope other participants can add, yeah, because this is a public discussions. In my view, I'm not too optimistic, yeah. Of course, I'm a pessimistic person in terms of the future of media and democracy. What I can say that when we see the public rally now in Jogja, for example, in the last 2 days, there were like student, also academics, social activists in coalition, in collaboration together mass rally. This is not about to change the countries. This is about not about the ideal goals of changing the political system. In my view, this action should be continuous, simply to keep that the critique, the public appreciation about the political dynasty alive, still on publics. That's very important, right? In our communication cultures, in our communication perspective, we do talk every day to keep that the conversation is alive, right? And Indonesia now has this problem because when we go into social media, there is no critical conversation there. In social media, mostly you will find this information or publication of data of Jokowi, his family, from bad issues to the good issues. In summary, social media is still favoring what we call now buzzer in influencers working on to stand instead of authorities, not to public interest, and they produce every single narration, every single topic. That's why the social media is lack of freedom of expression. We need offline rally, we need public rally to voice this in consistent way. That's very important. That we can say at least so far now. But let's say we have, of course, we need to move forward from mass rally into the political rally. The political situation in crisis, and then at the end to punish this very what do we call it? Very bad, very critical powers, very authoritarian powers of Jokowi. So that's my point. That's my point. I hope others can add or maybe also showing the experience in your own countries. Please, thank you.
So this is not a question, but I just want to clarify it on my in my understanding of post-authoritarianism, because you brought India into the context. For India, we had never been authoritarian regime. If you are equating colonial rule to authoritarianism, then yes, we can say yes to it. But apart from it, right from the beginning, so far, we have been, when we talk about democracies, we have to understand, are we talking it in organic term of democracy or generic term? So, being in India, we experience that democracy is organic to India. So yes, there was, if we take emergency as a period of authoritarian regime during Congress, Indira Gandhi's government, during 1970s, in 1970s, 75 to 77, it was emergency, period of emergency. That has been treated as dark ages to the democracy in India. But it also took a very interesting turn, because that witnessed the overturn of the government and new government came to power. So it actually gave the emergence to another party into the politics. So again, a kind of democracy or democratic process we observed in India. We saw J.P. Jayaprakash movement during emergency. So it was very democratic in nature. The whole process has been very democratic in nature. And if you talk about India, we see that we have, check and balances given in the constitution at various levels. So we have check and balance in terms of, government, the ruling government, and executive, the bureaucracy, as well as judiciary. So we have check and balance there. We have check and balance between union, the central government, and the states. And beyond that, we have village councils. So it has been, historically given very organic system of village councils and rural panchayats, we call it. So we have that democratic system within, the nature of the country. So because we were discussing post-authoritarianism and then we brought India into the context, so that is why I just wanted to, to understand it from that perspective. Sorry I took a lot of time, but...
Thank you for very intelligent comparisons between Indonesia and India. I learned much about this thing. I'm not answers. Perhaps others, non-Indonesian attendees want to share. Yeah? So while waiting the other participants to speak, let me just clarify what I mean by the post-authoritarian. This is the term I use when I did my doctoral study, and then the title of my dissertation is used also by this term. I mean, my dissertation topic is about public broadcasting and post-authoritarian Indonesia. So I mean by post-authoritarian is something in between, because post-authoritarian can be referred to the period itself. I mean, I started my research object from when the Suharto stepped down in 1998. The Suharto era was considered as totalitarianism powers or authoritarianism powers. And then I started my study, my object from 1998. But after the Suharto stepped down, there is no guarantee of democracy. Instead, it transitions in terms of governance, in terms of media system, in terms of political. If I refer to the Larry Diamond, in terms of the political structure and cultures. The structure itself still consists of what happened, what used in the Suharto era, and then the celebration of the Western promotion of democratic model in structures. Yeah, that's in general. That's why I use this post-authoritarianism instead of new democracies. There's also there are many other terms, right, from academic perspective. Okay, but India is a good example, of course. Yes. We now in Southeast Asia are trying to get more attention, pay more attention to Thailand military transitions. Also, some scholars consider that Indonesia in the last years copy Filipina model when the dynasty in powers. I mean, the son, the daughters took the power of her father or his father. And this is also unique, right? I mean, the unique situation. When we ideally refer to what democratic mean, it means that in election, citizen come to the box, to the balance, has a freedom. But in reality, there is no freedom because they have like economic problem, right? So this is very basic issues. And then the government apparatus deliver sembako to them, they deliver money, to influence their decision when they put someone. Okay. Other perspective, silakan. Saya balikin ke moderator. Silakan.
Thank you, Pak Ading. Anyone wants to share thoughts or other questions? Okay. Or maybe Pak Ading, I'd like to comment on your point on your pessimism about the future of media in Indonesian democracy. Actually, as a social media users, actually I feel quite optimistic actually, because like from our last demonstration, which I joined the protest as well, actually I feel quite optimistic about the Indonesian democracy because of, you know, the many people can, you know, voice their critics, and also in social media they share the same post, you know, criticizing the governments, something like that. So that's why I actually not really understand, based on your analysis, why you are pessimistic. Meanwhile, not only me, maybe other younger generation or other social media user, you know, seeing the hype, you know, from social media, are optimistic about the future of Indonesia. So, what's your take about that?
Okay, this is the similar question addressed to Nico yesterday. Why he was so pessimistic? Maybe I'm a colonial man. In Indonesia, we often call generasi kolonialis. And as a millennial, you have to be optimistic. I would agree. That's the only answer. Yeah, because social media, politics is your future. Yeah? If we get back to my slide, that there was a very good history on the Middle East, right? With the internet influential, when the internet facilitated the influential person, facilitated the political expressions, and then it connects to the offline discussion, offline rally, right? This is a good question. I mean, invite me to connect not only political issues but media and communication issues, right? We have the problem of regulations. We have very less intention of the law. For instance, we have broadcasting law, we have press law, but there is no internet law which favoring the freedom of expression. That's the issue also on my side. What I mean by the case study on the last maybe the last week or maybe the last 3 days about social media movement, which can influence Jokowi, Prabowo, and the parliament to change their manipulative decisions, is a temporary. We need the state attention. We need the government, not intervention. This is a negative way. But according to the German democratic system, we need the responsibility of governments. What kind of responsibility government can provide is to produce strong regulation to protect this freedom of expression. That's something that we can aspire when we do mass rally again. To push the government to revise many media and communication law, to update and to fit this law into the public interest instead of family interest, instead of industry interest. That's maybe my answer so far. But I'm sure maybe Nico want to talk, and I'm happy to hear you. Please, silakan microphone please to him.
Thank you. Also, thank you for dragging me into this. Because I actually wanted to come back to what you said at the very end on the importance of celebrating hybridity but remaining critical. And I think I do agree. But maybe there are also limits to the celebration of hybridity. Because hybridity is also, maybe that is different from contingency. Hybridity is also about the combination of different ideas or practices or spheres. It's about an integration or an articulation. And if if you start combining good things and wrong things, we shouldn't celebrate hybridity anymore. We should definitely like cut it and get rid of the problematic part. So I think there, celebration of hybridity, like, oh, we have some really good things in our society and we violate human rights all the time, oh, let's celebrate hybridity. I think that is probably where the limits of hybridity kick in. And we have to say, we don't want this combination. We want another combination. And we want to have diversity, but within what I would call the hegemony of democracy, with the hegemony of peace, if at all possible, to be completely naive now, but still. So I think that the celebration of hybridity can only occur within a hegemony of democracy and within the hegemony of peace. Then we have something to celebrate. But I think what your talk made very clear is that you can, through the logics of hybridity, be pushed away from an area where you're comfortable, where you're happy, where you're safe, and there's nothing to celebrate, I think. It's a statement, but it's of course a question, because again, I think your talk is vital in showing that there are limits to what we should celebrate. That is for me very, very important, and I really want to thank you for bringing that out, because it's crucial.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification and alerting me about the celebrations. So if I might say that celebration means at least acceptance, but with critical position, right? Maybe we accept this condition, but in critical way, because this is not normal. For instance, our election was okay, was fine. Everyone can go to the box. But the result is politic dynasty. that's crazy, right? So we have to accept it as a reality, but we are trying to criticize this and finding out the more democratic, or maybe not. Democracy is a very broad term, but maybe from hybridity we push to move forward to the diversity. So to celebrate diversity. Because this is in Indonesia, in terms of ethnicity, is diverse in nature. And with the celebration, of course, we can, at some point, stand as a critical person, without avoiding this, without blaming this as the Indonesian, as always we did. In bahasa Indonesia kita tidak harus meratapi terus with this condition. We have no other choice, but we try to engage with the critical societies outside the wall of this university to understand and to keep our healthy thinking, our healthy perspective regarding these issues. Okay, thank you again. Next, we have 10 minutes to go
we
to...
have last 10 minutes? Okay, maybe...
Okay, thank you for this is a very rich discussion about the hybrid, the concept of hybridity. Just I would like to add something that, like a variable to add what we miss. I think Nikos yesterday has already mentioned, but not explicitly. It's about the context of post-colonial societies. This is the issue that, like Indonesia, India, and also others, like Cyprus, is a post-colonial societies. And our paper earlier this morning, we add the political, not the politics, but the political dynamics of this hybrid of anything. And we try to use the concept of creolizations. And this is something that we cannot avoid hybridity. Hybridity is everywhere. It's happening in everywhere. So nothing is origin, nothing is asli in Indonesia. Everything is hybrid. But which culture dominating the others? That's the main question. And this, speaking about the power relations between, yes, everything that's mixed together. And I would like to, so my question is actually to, if, not only for Mas Adi, but if Nico can reply about this. Because power is never static, it's always dynamic. So yeah, now in Indonesia or in Cyprus, now the dominating is like that. So there is sometimes perhaps there will be a process that the elite will change or something else will arise, and this kind of dynamics that we should, as cultural studies, I would say, focus on rather than Mas Ading said about meratapi. What is meratapi? This is a challenge for us as a cultural or media or studies to understand this kind of dynamics, but also we are part of this kind of political process. So my question is that as a cultural studies or as a scholars, what we can stand, what is our stand position if we see this degrading democratizations? I think that's my question.
Nico, want to the first response?
You're being too polite. Thank you for that. I think what you actually do, you bring in the notion of time into the equation. Like, how do you deal with post-colonial histories? Well, I'm not sure if this is good, but because it's switching on and off. But I think the notion of time is crucial in understanding hybridity. Because time and history, of course, always leaves its traces. It is always a re-articulation of the old. There's always a new combination being formed at the same time. I think there's this dynamics of evolution, of change, but also using building blocks from the past. And of course here the post-colonial history kicks in tremendously. And at the same time I would argue we need to distinguish between analytical levels and normative levels. Right? We need to acknowledge, yes, there is diversity. But then there is the question, how do we handle that? What do we want to do with that? What does a society want to achieve? Are there parts maybe that we should get rid of? That we need to change because we're having a building block that is actually a real block, that is hurting us, that is keeping us back, that needs to be dealt with. And if I may for just 1 second, because I'm a Belgian, right? So a neighbor of the Dutch, as they say. So I'm a bit familiar. If you turn it around and look at it from a Western perspective as colonial powers, there is the huge problem of not coming to terms with the Western past of being colonizers. Right? There's a huge silence about how these countries, and Belgium was one of the worst for the record, how these countries actually behave themselves and how to integrate that in contemporary Western societies, how to deal with that. That is one of the biggest silences we're dealing with. So it also works from the other side, where there's still a history that needs to be integrated into how we deal with democracy and how we deal with being part of the global world from a Western perspective. And that is equally important and equally problematic, I would say. But thank you for that point.
Thank you, Nico and Mas Anthony. Okay. I'm not going to answer simply because Nico has answered your question completely. I apologize. I tried to. That's political. We are now, I mean, let's discuss this in detail later, but in general, when we experience what Jokowi did to us during the last 10 years, we're now dreaming to coming back to Suharto era, right? And also, some extent, we are dreaming to come back earlier than Suharto, maybe the colonial era. That's a danger. That's also the model of hybridity in mind, the model of political hybridity. But let me closing my talk in one very important another point as an academia. Yeah. Yesterday I was invited by the Department of Communication Universitas Budi Luhur to review their curriculum, new curriculum, online. And it's clear that this is the example of what we are experiencing in many communication departments, right? Our curricula is exactly hybrid, right? Hybrid between the practical mata kuliah with the conceptual mata kuliah, kira-kira gitu. The practical courses and the conceptual courses. Our curricula is hybrid between the positivistic perspective with the critical perspective. That's our challenges issues, right? Maybe Indonesian politics is hybrid is because our university, our higher education is hybrid also. This influence. So we produce hybridity at the end. I mean, we produce the problem of hybridity, which oppose what exactly the goals of our life as a citizen in Indonesia and what exactly the goals of this country. Is it to be a democratic country in the future, or is it to stay going on like that right now, to be a hybrid, to be an unclear state governance? And that's because of our problem in our communication studies. Yeah. Let's discuss this later when we have lunch and the next session. Thank you for listening, for joining us, for sharing. I apologize if I have very mistakes. And let's celebrate and critique hybridity in one way. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Mas Duki, for a very insightful concluding remarks. I think that's a very important note to all of us. Don't lose hope. Keep being optimistic about our hybrid democracy. I think that's a very important one. So this is the end of the second keynote session for today. This is our last day of conference actually. We are very glad to have you here as our participants. And to end this session, there will be a token of appreciation given by our head of department communication, Pak Iwan Awailuddin Yusuf. Thank you very much for Pak Iwan Awailuddin Yusuf and of course Pak Mas Duki for a very insightful and thought-provoking presentation. So the next session would be lunch, and the lunch will be